Crobat is a pretty cool Pokemon unless you are unfortunate enough to ever see any of its 3D models that show its teeth. But in particular, Dark Crobat was a metagame defining card. It doesn't look like much until you remember that 100% of decks in this competitive format used Cleffa and or any number of baby Pokemon that all had 30 HP, but with that special baby effect where you had to flip a coin before you attacked to see if your attack even went through. So now when you consider Surprise Bite, you notice that it can deal 20 damage to a Pokemon, any Pokemon on your opponent's side of the field, without actually attacking. And it even combos really well with Dark Golbat from way back in the Rocket set, where Sneak Attack is going to let you put 10 damage on any of your opponent's Pokemon. So just evolving from Zubat to Dark Golbat to Dark Crobat, you're able to place 3 damage counters on one of your opponent's baby Pokemon without having to flip any coins and getting a pretty simple free knockout. But that's off of just one evolution line. What you can do is devolve those Crobats using Hyper Devolution Spray and then re-evolve into Crobat turn after turn, and that's just one Crobat. You can have up to 4 on your bench, so you can evolve into Golbats and Crobats multiple times in the same turn, and then re-evolve after using Devolution Spray. Because of this strategy, Crobat became the #1 baby killer in the format, and it became very popular for spread decks. Because it fully operated from your bench using only its Pokemon power and never attacking, it was also very versatile and could be added into a lot of other decks. This version I'm about to show is probably the simplest of these builds, but just know that you can expand them, and let's just go ahead and get into the bare bones of this thing. Even though this deck is anti-baby, Cleffa is still very, very useful, since you do want to build up Zubats, Golbats, and Crobats all in your hand. That's pretty much your entire setup, is just getting all of those evolutionary lines in your hand, and then you can start laying them down turn by turn. You do need to be pretty strategic about it though, kind of calculate out exactly how you do want to stack your damage, kind of check and see how many babies your opponent has on the field. You don't really want to give away that you're a Crobat deck very early on, because then your opponent's just going to rely on maybe one Cleffa and try to avoid putting anything else that's low HP out there. But into turn 2 and 3, that's when your setup can get really strong. That's where this deck can be pretty devastating. On turn 2, you can deal up to 40 damage in non-attack damage, which means that you can deal that 40 damage however you like amongst your opponent's Pokemon and then still attack with a Pokemon that turn. So you see, playing full playsets of Zubat, Dark Golbat, and Dark Crobat in this deck, but I don't run any grass energy, so I won't actually be attacking with any of them. That is an option for if you do want to run pure Crobat. If you want to use those attacks, they're not actually that bad. You can evolve into a Dark Golbat and deal 10 damage, and then use Flitter to deal that additional 20 damage, but of course then you are going to be relying on a coin flip. Crobat's Dark Drain attack is really good in the same way, in that you can spread damage very easily with it, which really falls in line with the point of this deck. However, relying on those coin flips is a bit tedious, and I don't really like it, so instead I use Murkrow, because it's the go-to for trapping Pokemon as the active. On your opponent's side of the field, you can pull something out, or, if you time it just right, you can retreat a Golbat or a Crobat. They have free retreat, so you don't have to worry about running Switch or anything in this deck. Murkrow's the same way, free retreat, so you can swap them out really easily, throw down a Rainbow or a Darkness Energy onto Murkrow, and use Mean Look to trap your opponent's active. If you're lucky, you can maybe get a Chansey or something that it's going to take a lot longer to build up and attack you with, and in the meantime, you can just evolve and devolve your bats on your bench and just deal chip damage to whatever your opponent has and keep knocking out babies. Murkrow's Feint Attack fits in really well with the synergy of this deck as well, since you can combo off of a Dark Golbat, deal that 10 damage, and then Feint Attack for that extra 20 for a Pokemon that's on your opponent's bench. If the babies are on the bench, you don't have to flip that coin. Like I covered in the intro, Hyper Devolution Spray is going to let you devolve and re-evolve those Crobats over and over again, just dealing more and more damage without actually having to attack. Super Scoop Up is going to let you pull the whole evolutionary line up so that you can start over again from Zubat all the way up, which is going to help with dealing up to 30 damage instead of 20 every turn off of each evolution line. The Boss's Way is going to make getting that easy damage even easier by quickly searching your deck for Dark Golbats and Dark Crobats. And this can be very useful, especially if you can Eek or use a Professor card to get a hand with a couple of Boss's Ways in them. That's really going to help lay down all your Zubats, start evolving those bats turn after turn, and really get the ball rolling with this deck. And Pokemon Flute is going to let you be really sneaky with this deck, because once your opponent realizes what your strategy is, they're not going to lay down any more baby Pokemon or basic Pokemon that have low HP. So what you can do instead, you can recycle their own baby Pokemon out of their discard to put on their bench and then just target over and over again. Because you can use Pokemon Flute to put a Cleffa back on their bench, knock it out really quick, and then play another Pokemon Flute to put it right back on their bench, or alternatively use Item Finder to get another Pokemon Flute. The focus bands are for Murkrow. Since you do want to keep it alive, it's going to be your only attacker in this deck. Even though the damage isn't all that important from Murkrow, trapping your opponent's active so that you can better set up your bats on the bench is really important for this deck. So keep those Murkrow alive with Focus Band. 2/2 Oak Elm in this deck. It's pretty standard just to get those hand refreshers. Last, to kind of combat the energy removals from your opponent's side of the field, try to get those out of their hand very early game while you're trying to set up your Murkrow with dark energies, since you can only run 4 of them. In this build, I run 4 Darkness and 4 Rainbow, so you don't have to worry as much about the energy removal. But then again, got Item Finder in there to help recycle those Pokemon Flutes, those Hyper Devolution Sprays, even Super Scoop Ups every now and then. The spread damage and the stacking of damage counters gets even better with Rocket's Minefield Gem. This card is a bit of a misprint. It doesn't say exactly how many damage counters to put on. The errata says 2, so potentially just playing a basic from their hand, your opponent's going to have to put 2 damage counters on their Pokemon, meaning that they have even more of a reason not to put babies down. But even if they're going to play something like a Blaine's Charmander, that's a huge amount of damage. Even for a Pokemon like that you're probably going to evolve next turn, but when you're playing against Crobat, you may not get a next turn. If you're having to put 2 damage counters just for Minefield Gem, and then if, you play a couple of Dark Golbats or a Dark Crobat from your hand, you can knock out that basic before they even have a chance to evolve it. Got the Dark Energy and the Rainbow Energy in here to make sure that Murkrow can effectively trap your opponent's Pokemon. And then the Recycle Energy are in here for Cleffa and also for Feint Attack whenever you want to start using that during the game. This deck is so focused on baby knockouts that it doesn't even run Energy Charge or Energy Removal for that matter. And you can see how this deck can be very advantageous across all matchups for the base Neo format. However, you've probably also realized that there are some huge flaws in relying just on Pokemon powers of evolved Pokemon. Of course, the biggest card I'm referring to is Fossil Muck. It's going to shut down all other Pokemon powers, meaning that this deck can't really do much. The other big counter also being from Fossil in that Aerodactyl won't even let you evolve into your Golbats or Crobats, so again, the deck kind of falls flat in those cases. So to counter these, you could add in Igglybuff or Goop Gas Attack. These cards will allow you a full turn to try to pull out that Muck or Aerodactyl and knock it out so that you don't have to deal with it the rest of the game. So to overcome these obstacles, you would also need to add in Gust or Double Gust. That way you can pull out the troublesome cards and try to stack damage on them as fast as possible and get them knocked out in that same turn that you shut down the Pokemon power. Alternatively, you could run a more aggressive build of this deck, replacing all of the Murkrow with Sneasel. In this way, you still pose an aggressive threat against your opponent's Pokemon without having to rely on Pokemon powers. The main thing being that Beat Up is a little more difficult to use than either of Murkrow's attacks because it does require those 2 Dark Energy, but it is a much more consistent option for knocking out your opponent's Pokemon before they can really get to your Murkrows or any of your bats. It also means that you're going to be posing a threat from your active as well as everything on your bench, which does work really well. Just God knows I've uploaded enough Sneasel builds on this channel already. But it also helps tackle another common problem with this deck is if your opponent is playing all big basics or all really high HP evolved Pokemon that they can get out before you can stack too much damage on it, that can really mess with the efficiency of this deck. If you consider if your opponent has only one Chansey out there, it's going to take a lot of Golbats and Crobats de-evolving and re-evolving just to knock out that one Chansey. So if you have a Pokemon like Sneasel that can potentially two-hit high HP Pokemon like that, it does help out in that area as well. If you wanted to do the exact opposite and wall your opponent while you stack damage with Crobats, you could restructure the deck into a Steelix build. I've seen this build be pretty successful, especially in mirror matches. Even though Crobat's damage does bypass Metal Energy, just trying to take down a Steelix with Metal Energy on it while it's still tail crushing against you can be really tough. It really puts the pressure on opposing Crobat decks. If Rocket's Minefield Gym isn't really working out for you, if your opponent isn't hitting all of those coin flips the way they want to, you can substitute those out for Eco Gym because it is going to help protect the Dark Energy on Murkrow or whatever your main attacker is. Rocket's Hideout is another viable replacement option because it is going to help beef up those dark Pokemon, and that can be really helpful, especially with your Dark Golbats because they don't have very high HP, and you don't really want to lose them because they're very important for the structure of your deck. But if Rocket's Minefield Gym is working out for you, then you may want to also consider adding Dark Dugtrio because they play very well together. They play very well in spread decks, which is one popular way to run Crobat. And finally, probably the next most popular card I see paired with Crobat in competitive decks is the Neo Umbreon, because it can use Feint Attack in order to basically OHKO any baby on your opponent's side of the field in one go. Because the baby effect only remains active when the baby is your active Pokemon, this Umbreon can really just snipe babies off of the bench without having to flip a coin, which makes it a huge threat. Since it's also a wonderful baby killer, it's no wonder it pairs really well with Crobat decks. Especially when the entire point of this deck is to evolve into your bats as quickly as possible. If you're using the Black Star promo Eevee, that means that you're going to be able to evolve into this Umbreon super quick as well. As always, I want to hear what your favorite builds of Crobat are, especially those of you that play on TCG1. I love hearing stories about building the decks that I post and how well they do in that online competitive format. Also, keep those deck request ideas coming. I've been playtesting a lot of different stuff, trying to see what I can get to work. Some different rogue decks here and there, and working on a couple of other things to try to build up the channel a little more. I want to hit 500 subscribers by the end of the year, so if you enjoy my content, please share it. Get these videos out there in the community of people that are wanting to play these classic formats. Or even let me know down in the comments what you would like to see more of, what I could be doing better, and I appreciate any feedback you have. But until next video, guys, bye. And just a quick personal fun fact, where I'm from in Kentucky, flitter is a slang term for vagina, so this card has always made me laugh.